be working very well and accomplishing what needs to be done through the areas that are outlying from the Clean Tatla Lake area. Those permits will stay in place going through there until we get notification from the fire center that they can lift that order from an evacuation order to an alert, and at that time then we can open up the highway. We use the permits and keep it closed in that sense, really for a control basis. If something happens very quickly as it can with fires, then we have a system in place that says, okay, close the highway, don't let anybody through until that event is over, even if they do have permits, and that has happened a couple of times that we've had to do that. So that's the fail-safe on the highway itself, so that we don't get, if we were just to open it and say, you're good to go, and something happens, I don't know about you folks, but I wouldn't want to be a part of the potential tragedy that could come from that. So those permits are working well. They're allowing people to get through to your communities, to go fishing or hunting down the road here. I don't know what all can do, but I know there was some discussion about businesses when the pilot car system was on, that the cars were going straight through and stuff. So the permits allow people to pull off once they get through the Clean Tatla area. So that's about all I can put towards it.
I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, first of all, with regards to permitting, permits are very difficult to get, whether we're residents or not. For example, if we go out, we have to worry about getting back in again.
Okay.
Specifically, clean residents, I'd like to ask all of you today, when you came through on Highway 20, were you in any danger? Were you in any danger?
No, not at the moment, but that's okay. The key point.
So I've got residents down at Clean that asked for permits to come to this meeting, and they were refused by CRD. They were told if they left their homes in Clean to come to this meeting, they would not be permitted back to their homes. How is the permitting system working? Okay,
so the permits, first of all, and you've got a large question there, more than one inside one. So first of all, when you have an evacuation order, people are supposed to leave. There's those that choose not to leave. That's not part of what I can look after or not. Whether they get back in is not part of what I can look after or not. Now, when it comes to the permitting system, there is several avenues that have been put in place. The permits can be getting at Anahim Lake. They can be getting from Williams Lake. They can be done over the phone, where we can have pictures taken, and that's been happening, is sent through the phone to the participant, and we also been able to email. So I'm not exactly sure what else we could do with that, as far as making it accessible to everybody. But if somebody has a suggestion, then
the options are there, but the permits aren't being given out. There's all kinds of options.
There's no permits being refused right now. None.
So none. People that are clean.
But you have to understand. That's the other end of the spectrum that falls outside of my purview. If you're living in an evacuated order zone, I cannot control. If you leave, okay. The law states, as far as I know, that they should not be letting you back in. So.
Yes, over in the corner there.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why it is so difficult to get permits. Like I applied yesterday in Anahim, I was told I get one. Didn't arrive so far. And then I was like, how do I get back? And that lady told me I have to go to CRD office in Williams Lake to get one. So I call CRD office. So there was a very nice fellow by the name of Larry.
Yep.
And I go like, I need some sort of confirmation that I can make it back, because they don't want to email you permits for whatever reason, even if you told me that they do. That I will be able to drive back with my full loaded truck of groceries. I was not in Williams Lake for 2.5 months now. And so nobody can grant me that. They say if the fire comes. But I remember the Bull Canyon fire. We were driving on the highway through Bull Canyon. There was fire on both sides.
That's right, yeah.
And there was a pilot car which was going constantly back and forth. Not that, excuse me, BS, with 3 times a day, one direction. So what's the difference between the fire in Bull Canyon a few years ago and the Clean fire right now. And the question is, why don't they email those permits? It's a major pain to run after a piece of paper.
If you have access to email,
I
then,
do have
then,
access.
then I don't know why somebody told you no, but I will definitely, when we go back to Williams
Ask
Lake,
Larry.
I will talk to Larry. Larry's in the same room as I am, so.
Perfect.
And it was discussions with them that said, we'll take a picture on our phone and text it to them, we'll email them if they
Try
have
to
any.
text it to me.
Sorry?
Try to text it.
Well, I'm just saying, you know what I mean. Okay, but there are areas that that do get them that way via taking a picture of it and sending it. But I will follow up with why they're saying no email. If you have an email address, there is no reason why it can't be done in email. That was part of the program.
I will give it to you
I will,
afterwards.
yeah, afterwards, give me your name and stuff.
Okay, well, I think the next question is in the back there. Yes.
Just wondered, when this all started and everybody was told to leave Anahim Nimpo Lake, that as an essential service, I was heard the road maintenance contractor did not need to be here. He was told, you boys don't need to be there, get out.
The maintenance contractors were told that for anything other than what the fire center was asking them to do was not considered an essential service, and that they did not need to be there. That's correct. So the fire center would define the areas that they needed roads graded or whatever was to be done, and other than that, the rest of it, the normal day-to-day business was not considered essential service.
So if somebody hits a cow or a horse on the road, just leave it there, eh?
Well, we can what if
Trees fall
till it comes
on the
home,
road.
but it was being monitored.
So, okay, the guys leave, you need somebody to pull the trees off the road, or who do you get then?
We got you fellas to do that. We got-
We were told we were not needed, so we left.
No, that's not what you were told, because I was the one that worked with Sam and several and Pat Gunderson up here, and there was some very clear rules that were defined, and that was not that you couldn't that the movement couldn't be done around to remove stuff that was dangerous or potentially in the road. But it did follow through with the fire center. The fire center, there was lots of areas where IRL or whoever wanted to conduct their regular business, and they were told no.
All right, question in the corner there.
Earlier on, I think it was in July, but the road was closed for people coming in, but not going out.
And
You know, I'm in the tourism business,
Right.
and you know, it's kind of difficult if people, you know, can't come in. And I just wonder how it could be unsafe to travel one direction on the road, but not the other way.
the only time that as far as I know, that happened was when the alerts were turning to orders, people were evacuating, and then the only way out, and it was even divided on the last one. Some had to go to Ballacoola, and some went out to Williams Lake and points beyond. But that's the only time that the eastbound was left open, was as an egress route.
That was
to
over
that.
a month. That was for over a month on Drive BC. Every day we checked it.
Yeah.
Eastbound's open for evacuation. Westbound is closed
That
to all
was-
traffic.
That was after, I have to go back and look at the dates, but I don't know if it was.
Middle of July,
it was-
from the beginning of August.
Okay, so that would have been while the alert was on, or the order was on during Risky Creek. I have to go back and look at it. I don't have all those notes with me here.
We waited, we've been trying to move for ages. We waited from the beginning of around the time the fire started, around 7th of July, right through until I think it was the last week of July that it finally opened up, actually it opened up behind us to two-way traffic. And then it slammed back on again. So to the best of my knowledge, and I'll look it up, it was at least 3 weeks and probably closer to a month. It's only been eastbound.
I think the permits at not too far into July were for both directions, because we were, because once.
We had 1 week to go in and out.
1 week?
1
1
week,
week,
we had 1 week.
I'd have to go back and look
The
at it.
last week of July.
Yeah.
Okay, one person at a time, and let's remember we're all trying to work together here. So,
No, it's okay.
maybe one or two last questions, specific questions for Phil, at the back there. That's, yeah, you.
Can you explain about the permits when Anahim Nimpo was evacuated and the highway was closed? I decided to stay behind for about 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
Then I was told to leave by my boss. So I packed up, I went to the store to fill up, and I noticed 5 pickup trucks with their boats, fishing boats, going right through to Bella Coola to go fishing when the highway was closed. How could somebody like that get a permit? Whereas locals around here were told if you are out, if you decide to stay in an order and you decide to go to the store for groceries or whatever, and you are spotted, that you will be escorted out of the evacuation order. How can they be?
When Anahim was on evacuation order,
Yes.
there was nothing coming through that come through the CRD as far as permits go. So if they got there, I have no idea where they were.
I specifically asked them at the store, like, how did you guys get to come through here when it's closed? Oh, we got a permit. For what? To go on a holiday?
That's
I'm actually waiting for verification.
That's a surprise for me, so if you've got copies of them, I would love to have them.
So, sorry, one person at a time. The next question was back in the corner.
So anyways, I own the Nimpo Lake store, and I can verify this. Every day the evacuation was on, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 high wind days, there was tourism coming through from both directions, Bella Coola and Lanes Lake.
Yeah.
And in person said, just like what James is saying, nobody was on to move around here, but it said tourism was allowed to come through, and I had these people stop and fill out, and said, these are people I see every year that were coming through.
And that was when,
This was
I think, well, what was it, 3 or 4 days that Anahim was
There were
closed?
6 days on evacuation
6 days?
order, and yeah, so the first
So
day-
during that time?
Yes, during that time. The first day or two, when the winds were high, there was nobody, but after that, for the last 4 days of the order, I had all kinds of tourism coming through, and yet, as I said, nobody's allowed to travel around here.
I can't answer that because I don't actually issue the permits, but I can certainly find out why and make sure that it doesn't happen. Because there's no way that fishermen should have been going through when that evacuation order was on with Anahim and you guys. There's no way it should have happened, so.
So maybe it sounds like maybe this might be a good topic for future debrief, and then we can come back with more. Maybe you can provide us with the information that you're talking about. We can get that to Phil. We can come back and have a more detailed discussion about this at a later point. And thanks for your understanding. We'll also save some time again if you want to talk to Phil after questions at the end. We'll leave that for the end. So just so that we can keep going on.
Thanks.
Thanks, Phil. All right, so next up we have Sergeant Scott Clay with the Anahim RCMP detachment.
Thanks, Emily. Thank you, guys. I am your local detachment commander. Yay. Thanks, Colonel. Some of you I do know. Many of you I've met over the course of the last 8 months. For the most part, I think it's been on good terms. I've been on the ground since day one, standing in the front yard of Terra Nostra, looking at that lightning struck above Clearwater Lake, and we started talking about what was going to come. I really appreciate the local knowledge that's been passed on the last 47-ish days that we've been in here. Normally, there's myself, and there's 2 to 4 constables. We get pretty used to that. You know, the 5 of us in the community, we get out, we're pretty relaxed. We have lots of good conversations. I know there's been a heavy increase in the community the last month and a half. At one point, I had 25 police officers from BC and Manitoba. At one point, I had 70 military when they did a switch over. That wasn't planned. That wasn't asked for. It was just the way they switched their membership out. There's been some concerns voiced to me personally through various means of communication, whether it's social media, whether it's letters, whether it's things posted at the store, and then through some of my contacts as to why is it this way? Why do we have to have this? So what I just want to touch on is a little bit of what we've done as an organization, as the RCMP, and what I've tried to do as the local detachment commander to manage and to direct those resources that we've had. So we started out with Clean and Clean. We had that late night evacuation order that came down. There was myself, 2 constables, and 2 fish cops who came up the hill from Bella Coola to help us out. And we went around Clean and Clean at 11 o'clock at night, and we notified. Pretty much it was, here's your evacuation order, here's your boundaries, go tell these people what's going on. So we did that. Pretty much everybody stayed. Because everybody who was in that area, from One-Eyed Lake, Dowling Road, up to the McClinchy Bridge, 2 days later, 3 days later, was on that fire. I had some of my senior staff come in from Prince George and from Williams Lake. And I said, Scott, what do you need? So, well, I need some help. I have the communities of Anahim, Nimpo, Charlotte, Clean a Clean, the Ogacho Nation, all the seasonal people. I've got this massive area and I have 3 people. So they sent me 10 constables. Fresh off the bus from Surrey. They took their local knowledge while they were here. They shared it with me. I've only been here for 8 months. I've been in the Cariboo-Chilcotin for 15 years, but only here for 8 months. They gave me a little bit of insight as to how things work here. What happened back in 2010? What happened back in 2003? They also took that time to share it with the other members who came in, to help direct some of these Surrey, Langley, Burnaby members. Hey, this is how things work here. We've encouraged the people who've been here to get out, meet people in the community. You would have seen a lot of people driving around the last couple of weeks. A lot of police vehicles, both marked and unmarked, down all sorts of bizarre roads, maybe in your driveways or up in your areas on your ranches. In the back, I've got 2 gentlemen who are dressed in all blue. Lyle's from Alberta, Ian's from Port Moody. They're part of what's called our integrated TAC team. Their job, they are the experts in things like evacuations, large crowds. These guys have been in the community, and their counterparts from Alberta and BC have been in the community for the last 2.5 weeks, doing planning, creating documents, creating procedures by which we as a community, not just my office, but us as a community, can say, okay, if we have to go, this is where people are, here's what some of our options are. We've reached out to some of our locals that we have here for knowledge, looking for things. Because we all know there is stuff everywhere up here. We all have stuff in different places. We're very spread out. So when these guys are out around, driving around, they're just looking, finding information, feeding it back to us so that we can collect and we know where stuff is. What's some of the stuff that we have to be concerned about? The roadblocks, I know, or the road checks have been a sore spot. They're staffed by at least 1, if not 2 police officers. And there's usually a contingent of military with them, either regular or the Rangers. I've had conversation with a few people in this room over the permitting process, what my limitations are, what my understanding is. I've tried to answer questions the best I can and put things to the right venue. Those of you that have asked me direct questions, I've taken those questions up to where I can, whether it's the CRD, whether it's MOT. I'm on the phone usually 3 times a day, if not more, with our command center in Williams Lake. And when information is coming to me from the community about why are things the way they are, or can we change this, I'm bringing that information forward to those people. On top of that, if something doesn't make sense to me, or I don't understand why a decision is made the way it is, I am standing up and asking that question on behalf of the community. You know, I live here. My members live here. Our families were affected by the orders for evacuation, the orders for alert also. You know, all of us did have to send our families out. You know, I've had an opportunity over the last 47 days to meet a few people who've been affected more than once. There was a young woman down the road from the office who was out here for rodeo weekend from Spoken Lake when they got evacuated. So she spent the summer out here with their little 11-month-old until I had to go down and say, I'm sorry, but I gotta evacuate you again. Lots of us have been affected by this. My office is just trying to filter the information the best that we can, deliver what we have to the community in a safe, respectful, and clear manner. There is some stuff that we can do. We've worked with the community. We did the evacuation and the whole thing about children. We did have a few residences within the evacuated area where kids were present. We worked with the parents. We worked with the lodge owners and the staff who were there to make plans. My main thing I said to the people in my office is, you will not come down hard and heavy on my communities. We will be respectful. We will work with these members of the community to try to find a reasonable solution. If that hasn't happened, I want to know about it. Some of you said things to me. I've addressed them. I'd like to keep that going forward until such time as whoever it was said the snow flies. With that, does anybody have any questions for me?
Yes, they're in the, yes, you, sir.
Yeah, I'm a permanent resident of Charlotte Lake. And I'm just a little confused on the kind of the evacuation order status and how that's reviewed. And I mean, right now I know the south end of Charlotte Lake is still under an evacuation order. And I don't know if these are, I assume they're reviewed daily, if not hourly, to try to minimize the inconvenience to people who are affected by it. So today we have a sole resident, a senior, all by herself, the only person who is affected by this order. We live kilometers away, we are unable to go and check up on her. We have Checkpoint Charlie up there at Towdystown and Highway 20. She's the only resident. I don't understand why, and there's no imminent danger. I mean, I think we all of us that live at Charlotte can see right now there's no imminent danger from the Clean fire. It's crystal clear up there. Why this woman is imprisoned on her property and not allowed to come into town for groceries. There's a checkpoint there that could make sure she's the only one. The only rationale I can see is that for the CRD it's kind of convenient to not have to supervise her campground down there because she lives right past it, but just doesn't seem to be reasonable. There seems to be a lack of common sense that the authorities, and I'm not sure which agency would be responsible, but basically has abandoned one of our citizens.
Okay. So when it comes to identifying boundaries like that, I don't have direct say in, okay, here's where it's going to be. What happens is I get an evacuation or an alert order and there's a map attached to it. It gives me a defined set of like a defined location. So what I do and what we've been doing here is, okay, let's look at it from like a military standpoint. I verify the order. You know, okay, I've got your order. Am I understanding this correctly? And then I look at it because it may have been drawn up with someone who has local knowledge. It may not. I may look and say, like, you know what, I can't work with that because of where the roads are, for example. With respect to the Charlotte Lake evacuation boundaries, I don't know. That would be a question better suited, I believe, for the CRD, and I believe Mr. Richmond will speak to that one there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, maybe we can hold that question and then we can answer that one more fully in a few minutes. Yes?
I just have some clarification on how you check for permits through your Checkpoint Charlies. The comments that were made from James and from Richard about the fishermen coming into Bellacoola. I work for Bellacoola Fisheries, so I know firsthand. I processed their charters. And when they were coming through, word got out to these people throughout the province, wherever they were coming from, that even though they had their totes or whatever, if they wore volunteer firefighting t-shirts, they were just waved through. without having to have a permit. So where does the common sense equation come into that checkpoint? And a double question with that is also with status cards. Same idea. Wave through, no proper permitting. So I'm confused on that issue.
No, for sure. So yeah, so going with the boats, because I had a strip torn off me about the boats from Donna up the road there.
Yeah.
When they were coming through. I think we all know when she tears a strip off you, she tears a strip off you. So she tore a strip off me pretty good on that, and then not too long after that, I went down and I had a chat with Rich. I'm like, okay, I got to figure out what's going on here. Got on the phone and we determined the pass-through permitting process. But that led to that next part of the conversation, which was, okay, what are we doing to verify that people aren't blowing smoke
Exactly.
and taking advantage of these, I'm going to admit, these young, junior members of the RCMP?
Right.
Because I did have a lot of members who had like under a year of service that were here for a bit. Say, okay, what are you doing to verify? Let's talk about the common sense. So we discussed status cards, we discussed essential services, we discussed the volunteer, volunteer fire type situation, we'll do that. And we kind of went a little bit to the other side where we had that hiccup for the first day with the essential services where the mail truck and the food truck and the milk truck all got stuck in Tattle Lake. So we kind of went from one stretch to the other where we found that common ground, which led us to, you know what, daily at our briefings at 6 a.m.-ish and 6 p.m.-ish when we were dealing with our groups that were coming in to say, okay, common sense, however, things to look for. Someone wears a volunteer or a red shirt because they say they're working for BC Fire, verify it. If there's no indication that it's anything more than, hey, I'm with the fire, press a bit more. You're police officers. Use your investigative skills. Now that may have come across as a little bit hard and heavy to someone who may have got stuck up in that there. But I was trying to find that happy balance. Because there were people that were taking advantage of the situation. That were not being honest, that were not trying to go through the legitimate channels. Whether it was because they didn't want to, they were frustrated by it, I can't speak to that. We did have some hiccups along the way. This is a continuous, ongoing thing for us. This is not, I'm a police officer. I, catch bad guys. My guys in the office, they catch bad guys. This is kind of new for us, it's not a regular thing, so we're working as we go to try to fix this so that we can curb some of this frustration.
Right, because there was, it caused a big problem, obviously, and it was kind of rubbed in people's faces. Yeah. Oh, well, I got through, that sort of idea. When you have people legitimately sitting for days at the CRD office in Williams Lake, trying legitimately to get a legitimate permit, and these people are just flying through, and they're making jokes about it. And it wasn't right, and like you say, from moving forward, that this is something, and I understand, you get the rookies up here and everything else, and God bless them for being up here and helping out, but there's gotta be from somebody like yourself or the higher ups, you've gotta set those ground rules in the beginning so the system isn't abused.
You're right, and that's where we've gone forward, and myself and Sergeant Morrison in the back there, him and I, that has been our consistent message to our membership now is, okay, if it doesn't smell right, dig deeper. If you have to wave someone off to the side to dig deeper, let other people through.
I think the next question is in the back there.
Me?
Yeah.
I might not be using the right words because I'm from Switzerland. I think it might not be good enough. I went to Williams Lake yesterday, and for the general information, I had a permit. I got it from Mrs. Chamberlain and Anahim. I went to Williams Lake, got my permit back again. I want to say thank you for one thing. Mobilization, being mobile, is a human right. And I said at all the stops, Checkpoint Charlie's, I said I'm thankful at least the only person who can rightly stop you on the road is the police. No other person is entitled. And I was glad to see at both points there was police. They were very polite, so I said something nice. Now I'm saying something bad. And Scott, I wish you really went, I'm using names now. Bill Smiley.
Yeah.
Am I pronouncing that rightly here? He's probably not here. he lent me, borrowed me a pump to help down at the precipice. So I don't know him very much. He's an old guy, he's more than 70 years of age. He was using the words, and that really, I don't even know what officer he's talking about, but please follow up with him. He's using the words to me, very friendly guy. He said to me he wished he would come along and fight, you know, as old as he is. He says the police officer that he was talking to, well, now I'm literally abusive, his words, up to physical.
Okay.
And that, you said yourself, you know, I don't want that to happen to my local sheep.
Yeah.
If you so want, because you're the shepherd. But I don't know, I wasn't there, but I'm quoting him. And that to me is way beyond, you know, like abusive and physical, like, you know, being pushed around or
Yeah.
whatever. No way.
Yeah.
And I can't verify it, I'm just quoting him.
No, I appreciate that. I know Bill. I've talked to Bill a couple times since I've been in the area. So that is something I will follow up with him on that because, you know, and this goes to anybody else in the room. You know, I'm very much an upfront person. Everybody has credit with me to start out with. I'm open. I have big shoulders. If you have a question, you got a problem with something I'm doing, something I'm saying, something my guy is doing, whether it's that.
Told I can't even go to my neighbor's for a glass of wine. All right, so if it's gonna be that heavy-handed, is it gonna be, then there should be some consistency there. So the fellows I spoke to said, no, we've got some discretionary power. Like, you know, if you need to go check on the neighbors, if you need to go do this, you're probably not gonna get hassled too much. On the other hand, I think it was one of the local cops, Zach, that told Richard that under no circumstances was he to deliver groceries to anyone. Under no circumstances was anybody to step foot off their property. Where's the consistency there?
Okay. So Richard and I did talk a little bit about the whole grocery thing. We actually spent a bit of time on that in there. So if you actually go through, when you look at the Emergency Protection Act, there is the piece in there that says about being off your property, being escorted, resisting arrest, may be arrested. You know, I'm really narrowing down the passages there, but the discretion that we have there was, you know, am I going to say, oh, Jane, you're off your property, please come with me. Okay, we're going to clean a clean. You know, you're off the island. No, we're going to say, okay, you know what? We got the order in place. Probably should stay at home. We weren't kicking people out of the lands. We did have a little bit of a miscommunication is the wrong word. We had a debate about that in the office, and at the end of the debate, I basically said, okay, I appreciate what you said, and you're right, it was Zach, because Zach did come to me after that conversation, so I have no problem saying that there. Like, yeah, I can appreciate what you're saying. We're not encouraging people to be out and about, but in the same token, we're not going to say, okay, you got to go. So I addressed that when it was brought to my attention there, because I had said, as my rule in the office, we will have our discretion on that. There's some things I have no discretion on, some things that are beyond my control, but that was one of those things where we weren't going to go start booting people off of the land because they were.
Okay, so if this power is given to you through the declaration of emergency legislation, what protects us from somebody in your position in the future being hard-handed, arresting us from doing that? What can we do to make sure that that is not going to happen when we don't have a reasonable person
Okay.
like
So,
you in power?
Okay, so one of the things that Sergeant Morrison and I are working on right now is exactly that. You know, the next time. The next time this happens, what do we do? What did we learn from this time? What
So-
can we do?
so
Let me just give me a second here
Okay.
because I think I can answer your question for you. What can we do next time, and how do we go about doing it? So if I'm not here, this happens in 5 years from now, and there's a new sergeant and a new cadre of constables here, you know, and adding something like, you know, when we start going down this area where we have fires, floods, whatever the case is there, you know, striking right out of the gate a working committee, members of the community, because we don't have organized communities here. So I don't have a mayor and council that I can say, okay, what are our rules? What are we going to do here? How do we want to enforce this? But having representation from Nimpo, from Charlotte, from Anahim, from Clean a Clean, to exactly address that. What's the expectation that we want in this here, you know? So that if
Well,
someone.
I'm just gonna stop you
Okay.
here. According to the legislation and the act of declaring an emergency, the only person that can do that is the person at the top, the premier
Yeah.
or the minister.
Yeah.
So going down the line, no one at the bottom can make their own rules.
No, but if I can advocate, or my position can advocate for that,
But,
this is how I
but
want
that
to do
doesn't
this.
guarantee us
No,
anything.
no, it doesn't.
That doesn't guarantee us
No, it doesn't.
anything. So I want protection in place coming from the top.
Okay.
That when the order is drawn to declare a state of emergency, he curtails your powers. And
Okay.
it says you cannot arrest people, you cannot do this to them, you cannot do that to them. That's the only place that we are guaranteed to have those rights.
Okay. So what?
So it doesn't matter what you think on the ground.
Right. So I guess my question to you then, and we can take this off if you want afterwards, is how can I help you get what you want there? What can I do for you? And I'm willing to work with you on that, and if it involves us having more conversations with our elected officials or going with them
So-
further, I will help you with that.
So when all these decisions are being made, the declaration coming from the top was carte blanche. I don't think there was any holding back of powers or curtailing of powers. And so when it's coming down to the CRD and to your rules, what you're following, are you following the state of emergency rules? Or is the RCMP under its own umbrella and they follow their rules?
We follow the state of emergency rules, and we try to work with the communities and the population within the communities to come to a reasonable solution that sees everybody, not maybe necessarily happy, but at least taken care of, or their concerns addressed.
So when we're coming down from the top, and the CRD is making all these calls that the people in the Clean and Clean are under house arrest, but the vacationer can drive through, how does that jive with the legislation? How is the CRD overriding the provincial legislation that says they are on order of evacuation, but the fishermen can be in that evacuation zone for the half an hour it takes them to drive through it?
You know?
How does that jive with the legislation?
And that's gonna be a CRD question, not an RCMP
And
question.
I think, I think the questions around the state of emergency and stuff might, maybe we should leave those to the end, and we can come back to that.
So just let me to clear it out with you. You have no powers, like the local RCMP station has no powers to overrule the CRD and their
No.
interpretation.
No, I work within the framework that the CRD gives me on the evacuation order to achieve what I'm being, what the order is. So the order is, you will evacuate the Clean and Clean from Dowling to,
So the only way for us to guarantee anything is to have you advocate on our part and change in 7 days, when's the next order coming down? When's the next order to be written? How many days in are we in?
You're talking about the
7
local
days?
state of emergency expires on August 23rd,
That's
today. I think.
Okay, September 1st.
September 1st, September 1st.
So I was talking about the Cariboo Regional District one, yeah.
So can you advocate right now for the premier to change the rules? So
no, but what I can do is I can take more of your concerns. I've got no problem having a further conversation on this. I guess is really what I'm trying to say. Like, at the end of the day, this is your community, this is my community too. And I am here to serve you guys. And I'm not beyond having that conversation with you and doing what I
The
can.
conversation that my husband had with you last night is you cannot do anything,
Who's your husband?
Patrick,
Okay.
about letting the Clean and Clean
Yeah.
people come
And
through.
I actually,
You cannot do anything.
but I took Patrick's concerns, and actually, Mr. Richmond and I were on the phone a couple times last night, doing exactly what I said to your husband there, was I was advocating, okay, this is the information I'm getting, how can we work this? And Mr. Richmond and I had that conversation a couple times, so.
I think we'll have to sidebar this at this point.
For sure.
There's a couple other questions, this gentleman here and in the back for the RCMP, and then we'll move along to the elected officials, so, yes.
Thank you. My name's Tim Noble. thank you so much for your work. You've done a lot of work in the community.
I appreciate it.
And I think your members have done their best to enforce the rules as they've been laid out. But I think therein lies the problem. The problem is with the legislation. Because the moment that order was declared, we and all the community members that stayed behind were treated as if we were the enemy, as if we were criminals. And we went in one day from being valued community members to criminals. And that's not right. There's something wrong with the legislation that it treats people like that. We stayed behind to protect our homes and our community and to help in any way we could. And to be treated like that is simply wrong. So it's not the fault of the RCMP, it's the fault of the legislation, which really needs to be changed, and we need to have that conversation, because I think a lot of the complaints in this room go directly back to that.
If I could speak to that.
Thanks.
Actually,
Sorry.
I was gonna bring up the fact that we do, everybody knows it, you may not be on the email list, but that's exactly what we're gonna be doing, is trying to change that policy at the legislative level. So.
Thanks for adding that. And so one last question
I
at
just
the,
want to say one
Okay.
thing to Tim. Thanks for that, Tim. And actually, it was that the emails that you sent me right out of the gate there
Yeah.
that caused me to make that Highway 20 trip from
Right.
you guys all the way down to see Gerald and Joanna in Tatla
Yeah.
to start discussing how that, exactly said, that house arrest thing made people feel.
Yeah, that's the thing that stuck with me
Yep.
through this whole process, is that the whole thing just felt wrong.
Yep.
Because you guys were just trying to do your job, may not have been working out right all the time, but you were trying to do the job that was laid out for you. And I think the parameters of that are incorrect. They're simply incorrect, and it needs to be changed. And we need to work towards that somehow.
Could you tell us the year that Emergency Protection Act went in? Because we never had this happen in 2010.
And I don't believe I have that sitting on here.
It's been there forever.
You know, but that's something I can definitely confirm that for you.
No, we didn't get treated like that in 2010.
When did that come?
so, sorry, one person at a time. I think we'll have to sidebar this at this point. We have one question in the back left, and then we'll have to move on, and we can follow up on these questions after.
I just want to say a big thank you, especially RCMP, it hasn't been fun for my kids at all. They can't go to the beach, we can't do anything. But I had people come in the store and say, hey, come hang out with us. You know, we went and checked out the helicopters, the fire crew, let's climb all over their trucks, and it's just a big thank you. And for having a natural disaster, it really made it really fun for my kids.
You're awesome.
And we just had one last comment here.
I wanted to stand up and speak for the RCMP. We're all here today because the fire didn't burn Nimpo Lake down in Anahim Lake. And those orders are there to protect your lives. And had the reverse happened and you had stayed home and the fire had burned through your area, there would be RCMP, armed forces, trying to come into your burning home and save your life. So cooperate with the RCMP. You're lucky they didn't declare martial law, because then they would fix bayonets and they would drag you out of your house.
All right, so now we're going to move on to our three elected officials. So we're just going to give them each of them, CRD Chair Al Richmond, MLA Donna Barnett, and Area J Director Roger Williams, a chance to just give a brief update, and then at the end of all three of them, we'll open it up for questions to whoever you'd like to speak to. So Donna, if you want to start us off.
So thank you. So I don't know how long that legislation's been in place, but it's been there for quite a while. And I went through fires in 2003, 2009, 2010, 2012, 2017, and it's never changed. And so I've never had this kind of a conversation with the community before. I think the main issue is, and I've heard from many of you, I have letters, and I've listened to what you're saying. I don't think we need to change the legislation. What we need to do is what they've done at Charlotte Lake. The community came together and they were prepared. Even though they didn't have proper information, I contacted them quite often. I would like to work with your communities to put together community groups. So if something like this ever happens again, you have the leadership, you have the knowledge, you have people in place to do A, B, and C, to contact the regional district, to contact the fire center, to make sure that all the pieces are in place to make your lives easier. And so as your MLA, I can commit to that. I will be going after the government for some funding so that it helps you get there. And so that there is something in place should it happen, that you've got the funding and the people so that you feel like you're listened to and like information can get here as soon as possible. We will continue to pursue the cell issue, which is very difficult because of the cost of the towers. Nobody wants to pay. But there is a program out there right now. I just finished writing a letter before the fires to tell us, with the federal government, we, before we got kicked out, put $40 million into NDI for cell and connectivity for rural communities. And I did have a plan, but it's kind of gone down the tube now, to ensure that rural communities are serviced better. So that's my commitment. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. CRD Chair Richmond.
Thanks, everyone, and I'd rather be here under other circumstances. I miss my days when I used to have a place on Choco Lake and used to go fishing there because I used to cherish the place. So if any of you knew Dan Weir, he was a buddy of mine, and I miss him dearly. However, so since we started this thing on July 6th, we've done 120 orders and alerts. They've been changed and issued, and to the gentleman asked us how often we review them. Fire service was very correct, and it's not going to get any better. A couple of questions that came up. Parks. On Monday, this is not a new issue with the local politicians with respect to not putting fires on the parks. Donna's raised it, I've raised it. On Monday morning, Williams Lake, I said to the Minister of now Municipal Affairs again, I said, you've got to change the rules so these things get out, because they get out of a park, it's someone's idea of utopia, and something in our backyards and our communities, we have nothing to do with it, and they can't, forestry can't do anything about it. So that's not a new issue. That was raised again on Monday. We'll continue to raise it because it's not right. It's not fair. We need to do something about it. I know it makes some people feel great that I think we should learn from Yellowstone, but apparently we haven't. The lady that's isolated Charlotte Lake wanted who it is. The boundaries are done up, and we look at, they actually look at, yeah, well, you can get back to me after, if you would, sir, so I can find out. They do look at boundaries, they do look at structures, and we try to avoid isolating somebody. But of course, the idea is to get people out. With respect to the Clean permit, Scott's correct. He and I had a conversation, EOC director, I had a conversation with the administrator last night. The rest of the story is, I committed to stop at Tattle Lake on the way back with the same people here and have a meeting with the people on Tattle Lake that felt they couldn't leave their homes because we would not lie and misrepresent they could come back in if we let them out. So that's the rest of the story, was that we committed to go back to Tattle Lake in the parking lot of the community hall and have a meeting there with the folks that want to talk to us.
Well,
that's the truth.
People go from the clean to
It's all an order area, they can move. We'll meet with them. We offered, Scott was going to set it up, so I offered to meet with them. Scott can concur to that. We did offer to do that. I always say there's always four sides to every story. So last night at 8:30 at night, we're still going back and forth. How can we make this happen? How can we address their concerns?
They're under house arrest, how can they
They're
move?
not, no, so ma'am, I don't know about house arrest. Again, we're back to, there's an order in place that says you should leave, and the RCMP and the community are working together to have these things done. Under states of emergency, you asked me about, we don't, when we sign a local state of emergency, we don't tick all the boxes that provide all the powers required under those, and we stipulate who has those powers. And people like Scott are entrenched with trying to make it work in their community. We don't come and arrest you. We didn't ask anybody to put anybody in house arrest. He tries to put in what legislation says. Well, I'm not sure you're, yeah. We had, again, 25,000 people evacuated. My community, I was evacuated twice, as a matter of fact. I never heard anybody tell me they lived in fear. Nobody.
Well,
just
ask
here.
any of us.
Yeah, we weren't allowed to leave our properties, and
Well,
now
I-
the clean
again-
clean are not allowed to.
So I can only tell you that the RCMP worked with me to make that work. If the folks and your husband wanted to talk to me and talk to this group, we were prepared to meet with him within the order boundaries, just to have that conversation, because we had to pass through. So there's
I made
many
a phone
stuff.
call to the RCMP. It was the 11th of August, it was a Sunday, and I asked the lady that answered the phone, I think her name's Krista, if I was allowed to take a short walk. I live less than a kilometer away from the RCMP station, and she said to me, "You are not allowed to leave your house or you will be arrested."
Okay, so again, you need to talk to
We've
Scott,
been under house arrest.
because he's doing things
Everybody
locally.
here has been under
I
house
spoke to
arrest.
I think, sorry, one
So-
person at a
so
time.
The answer is that the RCMP are charged with enforcing what they can do and make it work in the community, and the situations they're dealing with, no one's coming down and telling them
They
they
were
have to do
told
something.
that directive came from
Let's,
you.
we have people who have their hands up and are respectfully waiting to ask a question, so let's honor that.
So I
Al,
think
you're open
Scott-
for questions.
So I think Scott explained that to you, that it's his job to implement the community, work with the community to make it work, and that's what he's trying to do.
So Al, are you
So-
willing to answer a couple questions? You want to finish
I
first?
can also, well, I wasn't gonna go through a large speech, so you talked about mail, and not getting mail. We went through to Minister Goodell in Prince George, and when we brought those to his attention, we said there's ways of getting mail in Anahim Lake. One was to fly it in, the other was to drive it in. They said they couldn't get through roadblocks. It's an essential service. It was allowed through if the roads were safe, as was food, as with fuel. And those were set up from the very beginning. And so we did have problems with road checks where information wasn't transferred from one person to the other when they changed the guard. And we had problems even in areas with cell service, I can tell you. They're just a little easier to fix. So, and it essentially going in food, fuel, and that type of mail, they were all essential services. They could all get through if the road was safe for them to put, not general public traffic on it, but essential service traffic. So I think I'll take questions later. Do you want to do them as a whole? Or do you
I
want to
think
do
we're
that
going to
with Roger?
allow Roger a chance to just give an update, and then we'll come back to your questions if that's all right.
It's only a short one. I'm from Clean. I have a permit for go out to Williams Lake. It's a range permit, and I need your signature for to go back. Sorry, I don't have a signature from you. I can't go back to my ranch. I have 20 horses on my
I
place.
think we'll have to have a conversation about
He's
this
your agricultural
afterwards.
man.
Thank
We'll
you.
have to come.
Thank you. And that's why it's not a political decision, it's a technical decision. So the folks that do the permits, just like we do the recommendations and orders, they're not done politically, they're done technically, they're based on information. And the only time, sometimes we get politically is when we're trying to say, could you please lift some orders because we're having a lot of pressure. And or we're concerned that they've been there too long. So Emily will have Roger have a few words and then.
Roger, and then we can open it up for questions, so.
Ja, das gesund. Und dann noch an das Nassat, und dann Chinatin, das gesund. Yet and do Huzunji in a god as Thank you very much for inviting us to be in your community to do a presentation and also to learn from each other. The language that I'm speaking is from this land, and I just really wanted to talk about communications. I want to thank all the presenters, the elected officials, the RCMP. We have the military here, a lot of work. I'm also a director for Area J. I'm from the Maya Valley, Honeycutin First Nations. The area I'm from is also the first ever Aboriginal title land. So there's a lot of work. I've been in this process for about over 20 years in leadership. And even for me, it gets pretty confusing in terms of communication. So, you know, I really understand how and what you're going through. But I think, you know, I'm here just to say that we need to keep communicating. Because, you know, if you're not communicating to me, then I'm assuming that everything's okay. And there's a lot of ways to communicate. You know, when I always tell my people that we have meetings, we don't really have very much people join and attend our meetings. But if we have a nice rodeo or event, a dance, everyone comes, even their dogs and cats. But the thing is that when I get up in the morning, is what do I do? What is around me? A lot of the things that I talk to my people, my family, is that what can I do to improve my situation? how do I move forward? And communication is the most, it's just like money, you never have enough money, same thing with communications, and I think we're just gonna improve communications, the process that we improve and we learn from. And I really feel that we're really in an organized chaos, because this is one of the largest fires in BC, and there's a lot of wildfires. A little bit of story about Honey. On Honey Road, we've been having a fire on the back end of what we call Hansville Fire, and a place we call Taguada-Chen in our language, Soap Lake, and it was spreading from 24 Board on the Maya Road, also known as the 900 Road, and just north of the Maya Road about a kilometer for about 6-10 kilometers. It looks good, no impact, and then August 12th, while the wind blew that fire right across the road, we have wild horses got burnt. I have members in my community that are lucky to be alive because they were driving through. And they said they were driving through, there was a point in time, even though the fire was around them, they had to stop because they couldn't see where they're going. All the dust, all the flames going back and forth. Stuff in the back of their vehicle were melting. They're lucky to be alive. So I think keeping that in mind, I just wanted to say that communication is important, and that I want to learn from you. You live out here because you love this place. This is where you're from, and you know this place. For me, we want to learn from the local people, because the local people know their land better. And how do we do that? And I just listened to the presentations here. A lot of the work that our people up here are doing is a lot of good work, but we're dealing with wildfire. And this wildfire is not going to end. The weather's not helping us out. And I think that's something that we need to keep learning from. With that, Sachanaya, thank you.
Thank you. So now we'll open it up for any questions of the elected officials. So I think the first hand was with you in the back there.
I'd like to ask Mr. Williams, but I'm new to this area. When you mentioned my people, who are your people?
Well, I'm standing here in front of you I'm Area J representative, director for Area J, so
are we your people?
If you want to call it that way. English is a broad language, Chilcotin's my first.
Okay, but do you consider us your people?
I try and do so, yes.
Okay, so my question to you is, when the evacuation order came out, there was a very different situation geographically with regard to Anahim Lake, with regard to Nimpo Lake, with regard to Charlotte Lake. They all faced very different threats. There was a great difference in terms of immediacy. If you represent us, if we are your people, why were we not differentiated from other people, other communities who were in a different situation? Why were we put, and I say that we were put under martial law, we were put under house arrest, effectively. Maybe that's not what Mr. Richmond calls it, but effectively that is what happened. Why were we put in that kind of situation for no real valid reason?
I think to answer that question would be initially, this whole evacuation order is for safety. And if a person decides to stay home, protect their land, I don't blame them. We have 4 Chilcotin communities out of 6 that were under evacuation order. The chiefs decided to stay home. They stayed home and fought for their land. I don't blame you. I think that being in organized chaos we are, I think based on knowing your land, knowing your situation, that you will fight for but we are very lucky. We got wild horses we call cayuse that know the land. It's pretty hard to catch them in a fire, but I've seen 10 horses burn. One of my members on the road I was just talking about, really lucky to be alive. So I think evacuation orders initially are for your safety. And that safety is to assure and to make sure that you're not going to lose your life. So yes, we have RCMP, we have military, we have CRD. We're all trying to do the best for you. And we have some people, even my own family, my own siblings that don't agree with me. But if there's an order, we need to be evacuated. But if you choose to stay, you have to deal with it. How do we best deal with it? And that's the only way I can answer it. There are some details that I heard. There's some answers that were tried to be answered, but I think reality, evacuation is for your safety. And if you choose to stay, we just have to work with it, and hopefully everything works out.
I think.
I just have one little question.
Okay.
Why is it the evacuation buses were here to evacuate people, but unfortunately, First Nations got priority, and only and were outright told, no, this is the buses are only for First Nations people. If we are all, and we are an integrated community, and I enjoy it, and my daughter is First Nations as well, so I'm not talking of discrimination, but just because we look a little different, we're not classified as part of the community.
So Roger,
Yeah, okay.
So Roger is there. So the buses you're speaking of were asked for by the Algachco First Nation to put a request in the regional district. We put a request in the pre-auc, and we sent buses out here. If Scott had asked for capacity to move infirm or people who couldn't travel on their own, we would have sent buses out here as well. So those buses were sent out for the Algachco First Nations who made a request for a certain number of people they believe need to be transported in. So we made that request. Had Scott indicated there was need for bus transportation out here, we would have done the same. So those buses arrived at 10 o'clock the next morning, I believe it was, after the request. So they were sent out for the Algachco First Nation. If we'd been aware that someone needed a bus, we could have actually had buses pick you up, but we weren't aware, we weren't made aware, and we relied on local establishment to tell us
But
that.
at the time, when the chaos and everybody was afraid, why discriminate? Why, if there's room, take them all?
To my knowledge, there was no discrimination, but they were sent out for the Algachco First Nation who put a request in.
Yes.
And if Scott had asked that and come in, we could have gone
I
on.
realize that, but if somebody else wanted to get on the bus, they were refused.
I don't think they were refused. I spent a good amount of time when those buses were there just trying to figure out who was actually leaving, looking at numbers basically. This goes back to what I said earlier about the actual working with the communities to be able to address these things, because no one directly came out to me through my canvassing with my alert guys saying, hey, we have 10 people in Charlotte Lake or 20 people in Nimpo who have no means of transportation. You know.
Sean, use your mic. Some
Sorry,
people might be hard of hearing.
Use the mic is what she asked.
Yeah, use the mic.
You can just talk right into it.
So,
I heard that.
So this is what it comes down to for learning and going forward. If we have a transportation concern for future events that could happen, we can build it into the plan. Lyle back there is making notes of things that have been popped up, and that'll be worked into our plan. You know, what do we need? Do we need to make sure we have a bus for Anahim, a bus for Nimpo, a bus for Charlotte? If we do, it's there so the next person, 5, 7, 10 years from now, okay, bus is required. Phone call to Mr. Richmond or his replacement 5, 10 years down the road. We move forward.
So I think the next question was the gentleman there, second row.
Yeah, Mr. Richmond, I didn't come here to be confrontational, but to receive some information and maybe provide some, but as I mentioned, unfortunately, at Charlotte Lake, there's what, over 100 properties, and because of the lines drawn, only one sole resident falls under this evacuation order, and I was asking if maybe you might have a look at that to see if there's anything that might be done to allow her some movement.
I'd like the details so I can look at the map, because normally they try not to do that, so.
I'll stay.
If you give me the address or something,
Great,
we'll
thank
have a
you.
look at that.
Thank you very much.
I think the next question is here.
I was, my wife and I were in the roadblocks there and piloted through the other day. I've heard that we've gone back to the permitting process now, which to me causes a lot of angst, confusion. And, we can get it online and stuff, but it's still hard. You've got to travel to get it or do something. So I want to know from the police, and you could just simply stop them with the pilot car. It's damn simple. And I would like to hear a comment from Sergeant Kelly there on what his comments would be, one or the other too, because I think it's a police matter too.
Permitting and travel on the road, this actually does not fall under my responsibility. So the only time that I can shut down a road is if there's an immediate emergency situation. So the example I always use is I'm dealing with a motor vehicle accident. I can lock that section of road down pending the completion of my investigation and the clearing and safe of the road. If I need to go long-term, I have to go to MOTI, and for something like the permitting, we have the CRD. I'm open to conversations with both of my counterparts here as to how we can do that, but ultimately, the direction I get for what happens on that road comes from the two gentlemen sitting on the other side of me here.
So here's the answer. The answer is no permits is the preferred method because we want to keep the road open, period.
Yes.
So you'll see, if you look at the Anahim, if you look at the piece through Highway 20 Risky Creek, you'll find we went 5 kilometers either side, so that's under alert. So the highway can remain open. If you look closely at the maps that went north out of Williams Lake, because the fire activity is so bad, we kept the narrow finger of the highway open because they believed we could safely do that. And again, the general public. We're not talking about someone like Roger or myself that goes down these roads and understands. I drove this country for 35 years, right? So I know it pretty well. We understand back roads, we understand where fire goes. We're talking about someone gets off a ferry in Bellicula and drives down the road with mother and kids and they're towing a tent trailer. If it's open for the general public, it's got to be safe to travel. That's the concern. So our preferred method is we don't close the road at all. It's open. So if we can do that, that's what we do. Permits are a pain, which is why we have someone in Anahim who can issue with the permit right now. As soon as it's safe through Clean and Clean, and we're told by the Forest Service that area is safe enough, and MOTI agrees, that road's going to be open because it makes life a lot easier. If it remains in order either side, though, then the RCMP have to try and protect those properties from people who will take advantage of the fact that people are not supposed to be in that area. That's the challenge. That's the hardest part about it. So the preferred method is we don't want to do permits. They're a pain in a place that you don't want to have a pain. They're really tough to administer. They're abused. We had to pull them from one company because they abused them and Xeroxed them, and we pulled their permits. Done, just like that, because they abused them when we tried to help. So it's difficult. So it's not a perfect world. Trying to get it better. As I said, we kept some narrow finger of a white line or a yellow line through to keep a road open where it's possible, if they believe it's safe either side of the road. But conversely, we've had people complain and yell at me in particular, you shouldn't let me on the road. There was fire both sides of the road and I was scared to death. Now that's that lady's perception of what she went through. The attention to forestry and ministry highways, it wasn't that dangerous, but it scared her. So fire affects everybody differently. So we have to try and make it safe. So we'll continue. As soon as it can be open, it'll be open.
Yeah, no, I would just vote for the pilot. I mean, you've got the security, they know, they're in contact, they're going, okay. And it's very simple. And I would vote for that over the permitting any day.
E3.
Thanks. So the next question I think is here. This
Okay,
gentleman.
thank you. It's not so much a question, well, as something to consider in the future. It appears to me that through this community meeting that we had here today, that the RCMP was acting in the capacity of an incident commander. And I believe that's where you were filling, Scott. What I would like to see in the future, hopefully we don't have a situation like this in the future, but what I would like to see is better communication. What we need then is cell phone service throughout the community down Highway 20, which you've already addressed tonight. understand. But what I would like to do, an incident commander does not work alone. What he needs is all of the various representative from each and every one of the CRD, the Ministry of Transportation. If a situation like this develops again, what I would like to see is a representative in each one of those agencies under your direction as an incident commander to be available to the community at a phone call at their convenience, set up at one particular location, that being the RCMP. And what I'd like to see is maybe we'd have 10 people there who would be specifically able to answer the questions that the community has with the authority to give them the answer that they're looking for. Does that seem that to be a decent idea there, Scott?
I see what you're saying, and I see the benefit to that for sure. You know, can we reasonably do that? That's something that I guess we're going to have to flesh out a bit more and discuss. I don't know what the reasonable availability of people is with that. You know, I do. We're running a variation of that in the sense that, like I said, with Sergeant Morrison back there as one of my advisors, I wasn't having it all on my own. You know, we have between our 7:30 and 4:30 each day. I'm in with my incident command, which is for the entire Cariboo-Chilcotin resource region out of Williams Lake. So I've got my commanders who are tied into MOTI, who are tied into the CRD, who are tied into health, who are tied into logistics, all that sort of stuff there too. What you're saying is you would like to have that access right here, basically a community group or a community specialized group to be able to respond to those questions as they come.
I would like to see that there. And once an emergency has been declared, that representatives for those societies should go to that nearest community and set up a central command, should I say, that would be able to answer the questions that the community has. And a person who represents each one of these agencies to have the authority to give them the answers that they want. Instead of saying, I'll get back to you on this particular issue, I can unequivocally tell you this is the answer. Communication is always the key. And we haven't had a lot of communication in this instance. We've got to look forward to the future.
I believe Barnett has some stuff in.
And I know you haven't had a lot of communication. That's why I got the calls from the ladies and we came today. I have got documents from your community, from ladies, from gentlemen, and I still say this has been a terrible experience for all of us, believe you me. Everybody's worked hard, done the best they can do, and we've learned. I still say communities have to take control of their own destiny, put groups together. That information, should it be needed, could follow through this group should we ever have another incident. There's lots of ways of doing it without expecting the next guy to do it. I've lived in many communities. We put many organizations, many things together to help our communities. This helps us build communities, helps us understand communities, and it helps you help people like me. You talk about this Class A park down here that Al was talking about, that we've been trying to get it so that in a Class A park, you can go in and manage the park. Every time we try, doesn't matter what level of government is, they say, no, a Class A park, you can't touch it. Well, that's wrong. You and I all know that. You have to manage everything. You don't desecrate it, you manage it. People like you can help people like us get the message across to make changes. So to me, putting a community group together, I'll help, everybody will help. In an incident like this ever again, you would be rest assured you would take control of your own destiny. And I think that's the best thing to do. Yes?
I don't understand how we can take control of our destiny when the legislation clearly states that the CRD and the provincial government has total authority. We can put together a group, but you don't have to listen to us.
I'm sorry, sir, we do have to listen to you. And you can create your own destiny because you would have a method to have information, to have input before another incident happens. We can't change the world. We can only try and make it better and work with communities such as yours. And if you don't tell us, we can't try to get those changes.
Okay, so we've told you
Yes.
that we want input.
Yes.
What are you going to do about it?
Well, what I'm going to do is going to hope that you're going to put a group together and ask me to come back out and have meetings with you and take that input and deal with it.
In which way deal with it?
Pardon me?
In which way deal with it?
If it has to go to the legislature, I will take it to the legislature. If my colleagues need to be involved, my colleagues I know would be more than happy to come and listen and deal with it in a manner that they have the authority. Yes, ma'am.
You said previously when you spoke that you don't believe that the legislation has to be changed. So I want to clarify.
The legislation doesn't have to be changed. Here's the difference. Too many people, legislation only gives the tool for the bureaucrats to make the policy and the regulation.
Okay, so when we're talking about this legislation and they say local authority, explain to me who local authority is. Is it Al?
Local authority is local government.
Is it Roger then?
No, it's Cariboo Regional District Board.
Board, and
Okay,
in
so
it,
how much input does our local being Roger have in that board? Is he sitting on that board every single day?
He's sitting on, Roger's informed of everything that goes on with his electoral area, period.
Okay, so when they're talking local authority and we are petitioning the local authority, is it Roger or is it the board? You're ahead of the board?
The technical is the Cariboo Regional District Board. There's 16 directors. It's
Okay.
the board that is the authority.
So there is talk in this community to disperse that power to a more local level. So to have the community, possibly Roger, be the local authority, and the community with Roger would be making these decisions of who is being evacuated.
no, you can't, under the legislation, I'm sorry, ma'am, you cannot do that under the legislation, the policy, or the regulations.
Yes, I know, but it doesn't matter how many community groups we have, if we don't have power over how that
I
decision
think the
is made.
message that I'm trying to get across is I would never want, if I was sitting in your chair and I lived in this community, to make a decision as who goes and who stays. I don't think anybody wants that
I think
decision.
we all want that
Yes,
decision.
Yeah, we do
Every
all want
single
that
one of us
decision.
wants
Yeah.
that
So
decision.
you want the authority to say that he should go and you should
No,
stay?
we want the authority to say that the Nimpo Lake community has voted that they don't want to be under evacuation order.
Yes.
We want that authority. And I'm sorry that our representative lives 200 kilometers away from us. He does not know what we are going through.
Let's make sure we keep things respectful.
Okay, that is why I'm saying you can't change legislation.
Why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
If you tried to get legislation on the floor in Victoria, 5 years from now, somebody might listen to you. They would listen to policy and regulation. I'm being honest, okay? I'm not here to argue with you, ma'am. I'm here to try and listen and help. And groups here have sent me letters on how they would like more engagement and how they would like to put people in place to help get the message across, to get information out, and that's why we're here. We're not here to argue with you.
Can the CRD board interpret that legislation its own way? So when you're making a decision, you are making a decision with a local authority on the ground right here in Nimpo Lake via the CRD Area J rep?
The legislation doesn't permit that, ma'am.
No.
I'm not a legislator, but I can tell you it doesn't permit that.
It doesn't permit that.
Okay, so I am confused with the legislation, how you can manipulate it, i.e. letting the fishermen go through.
No.
Well, see, ma'am, that's a different topic. That's got nothing to do with legislation. That's whoever,
I want to know how the legislation works.
what happened there was somehow those fishermen got through. I have no idea. But the legislation is the same for everybody in this room, everybody in the province of British Columbia.
Okay, I think,
Evacuation zone then?
Me?
Yeah.
I have a permit.
So how come the people in the evacuation zone cannot have a permit?
I got a permit to come to this meeting. Once I leave this meeting,
How come the people in the evacuation zone
I cannot
get a permit?
answer that, ma'am.
I think we're gonna have to move forward, unfortunately. We need to be respectful of your time, and I realize there are outstanding questions. Maybe some of these questions would be best addressed for the people who choose to stay behind. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your feedback. We will be coming back again for more meetings, for debrief. So I think we, maybe Al, if you want to just close it off, and then you can feel free to ask your.
We're not ready to be closed off.
No, we're not. We certainly aren't.
That's what, we didn't really come to hear political statements. What we came here was to voice our complaints and to ask for some changes. Ms. Barnett has said that there's no way to get reasonable legislative change. At the same time, she's saying that we should have a local community to give input. But at the same time, Al Richmond is saying, and other people are saying, that local communities are not going to be listened to because they don't have any voice. The only person that has a voice that represents us is the Area J representative, and he doesn't understand our concerns because he's not out here.
The legislation
I think-
doesn't give us voice.
So I think.
That's our concern.